All right, welcome everyone. Good to have everyone here today on this very interesting subject. We talk about it all the time. How can we get middle income housing? It's the missing middle. How our society thrives is with the middle income. And so today we have this good subject to talk about. How can we do a private sector type of a solution? And we have a great panel of speakers, and I'm going to jump right into it. I'll give you a little bit of details though. If you have questions, we'll save them all until the end. And so just put them in the chat box and then we'll manage through them. And our speakers have all of the answers that we need for today. But we're going to start with Ben Barker. He serves as a financial advisor to the California Municipal Finance Authority, assisting borrowers with qualified projects to facilitate taxable and tax-exempt bond financing. Mr. Barker's previous experience covers all aspects of mortgage-backed securitizations, and to date, he has participated in over $13 billion of structured financings on both sides of the debt and equity. And Mr. Barker also then has a BS in finance and business management. So Ben, glad to have you here, and you're going to kind of lay it out for us, what the program looks like, and then we have Sean who will, from Hope and Fed, talk about how it really works in the trenches. So Ben.
Sounds good. Thanks for the introduction. Again, Ben Barker with the California Municipal Finance Authority. Just to go into a little bit of background information, the CMFA is what's called a Joint Powers Authority, and that's a governmental agency that is made up of, in our case, 350 plus city, counties, districts, special authorities, different governmental entities that have all formed and are all members of the CMFA. CMFA primarily focuses on private activity bonds and conduit issuances. We are one of the largest or the largest affordable housing issuer in the state. I'm looking through the attendees, and I recognize a lot of people on this list, and I've done a lot of transactions or a lot of affordable housing deals with people on the list. So it's great to see a bunch of familiar faces here, but CMFA, we typically do a lot of affordable housing. Probably half of our business is affordable housing, do 50 to 60 deals per year, which roughly equates to $1 billion and a half. CMFA also does another couple billion in other types of debt issuances per year, which can be anything from like the LAX airport to like $1 million YMCA. So kind of run the gamut of what we get to see at the CMFA and what we focus on, but primarily over the last 15, coming up on 20 years of business, we've really been focused on affordable housing. Affordable housing, the stereotypical affordable housing that's financed in the state is financed through private activity bonds, and that you receive bond allocation from the state on, and then tax credits. And so that part of the market is maxed out right now. So the government, the Fed gives a certain amount of allocation that can be done each year, and we're tapped out. In fact, there's so many deals waiting in line, just the CMFA's portfolio. We have at least 2 or 3 more years worth of deals than we have actual bond allocation. So we've really struggled to be able to produce more affordable housing because we just can't do any more than what we're allowed to do. And the amount of deals right now per round to apply to get affordable housing is really 3 to 1 to 4 to 1 of deals applying that will be able to get affordable housing. So the CMFA started a few years ago. We really looked deeply into finding other avenues of creating affordable housing. We saw the competitiveness of doing the stereotypical affordable housing coming up, and we started looking into P3 structures around the country. We looked into kind of 501c3 structures, welfare exemptions, and about 3 years ago, this essential function housing bonds kind of started rolling out. While these are new in California, these have actually been around for quite some time, and they're a little bit more prevalent on the East Coast. So if you think of like those New York sky rises or Chicago kind of Detroit sky rises, those are structured very similar to these. The difference is in this section or this structure of financing is we've added kind of a P3 structure, a public-private partnership, where we're adding a third party to really run the project for us. So the CMFA, I do a lot of financings. I know a lot about debt financings, and lots of different ways to do it, but I don't know anything really about running an apartment complex or what it takes to run an apartment complex. And so you bring on a third party to help you run an asset. So about 3 years ago, these started picking up in California. There was a few done in the first year, then it really ramped up. And then last year really ramped up. And so there's been a total of 54 deals that have been done in the state of California, fairly evenly spread, maybe a little bit heavier in Southern California than Northern California, where a joint powers authority is essentially buying a project, an apartment project, and they are creating or having a city or a county join their JPA again, even though, for instance, most cities in the county of San Diego are already members with the CMFA. They join a sub JPA that will own and hold the apartment complex on title. The CMFA is still the sole owner. The joining of the JPA really gives us the authority to purchase it. And then along with that, we have a project sponsor or a project administrator who comes in and runs the transaction for us. So a little bit more background is there's been, again, about 54 deals that have been done since this program took off a few years ago. This year, due to the capital markets and the rate increases and everything that's going on, there's only been 4 deals that have closed this year. So quite a bit down from the 35-ish that closed the year before. There's only 4 this year, and there's very few in process. The rates have continually increased. Credit requirements have also increased, and these deals are getting much more difficult to do. But we do think that there's going to be an opportunity to do more of these deals maybe later in the year when rates settle down. Part of the process is going through the analysis with the city that will allow the CMFA to purchase a project. And that, compared to a typical affordable housing process, which could take anywhere between 5 weeks and maybe a month to get a TEFRA hearing, which is the local hearing, this takes a little bit more analysis on the city's part, and thus the approval process is much longer. From the length of the approval process, when a project is tied up to when the approval is finally done with the city, this year we've seen rates increase almost a full point to 1.5 points. So when deals have been tied up and underwritten, we've seen a lot of deals fall out because they just don't make financial sense anymore. So I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but that's why the news has probably died down quite a bit this year from last year. There's been 2 closings and 2 pricings this year. So I don't think there'll personally be any more pricings for another few months, but it's kind of a good time to pause and look at what's happened and kind of reevaluate the deals that have been done and look at if there's bad deals that have been done versus good deals, restructuring, and how people are looking at these deals. There has been quite a bit of evolution since the first deal to the last deals. There's been some criticism on the first deal, or criticism of the market, and really over the course of this time, we've looked at it and reevaluated. Fees have drastically shrunk. The developers are coming in and buying B bonds, tying themselves a lot more closely to the projects and aligning themselves much more closely. And they're definitely not as rich as they maybe were a few years ago. And so along with that, I think the most interesting piece is these deals are typical affordable housing deals are structured at 60% area median income and below. Most projects, and I just say that most, in the typical affordable housing project are usually 100% of the units are a mix of some kind of area median income of 60% and below. These projects are really structured at 60% area median income and above, really hitting the middle income housing segment. So in the typical process, excuse me, these projects will have 30% of the units will be 60 to 80% AMI, 80 to 100% AMI, and then 100 to 120% AMI. So really just think of it as 3 different buckets of affordability within these deals. And that way you can go in and the higher units can subsidize the lower units and you can get immediate rent relief in the project. So this, going into a little bit more detail on the structure is the CMFA essentially all we're doing is we're a governmental agency, we're buying a piece of property. in this case, we're buying a project, a market rate unit. And since CMFA is a governmental agency, we do not pay property taxes. When we remove the project off the property, off the tax rolls, we then take that tax savings and self-restrict the units. So we go in and record a regulatory agreement and restrict these units for 30, sometimes 35 years, and then there will be affordability within them. Once the project's purchased, we can go in and kind of do credit evaluations or tenant income evaluations on their incomes and place them into these different buckets. And Sean's going to get into a lot more details about the projects we've done with him and the savings and what we've seen, what we've seen on turnover and what we've seen savings. And I think most people going into this market or this segment did not expect the amount of savings that we've actually attained. And so just kind of sticking to a little bit higher level, again, 54 units. There's actually been more affordable 80% and below units created in the middle income housing space or the essential function bond space over the last 2 years than a typical year with bond allocation and tax credits. And so again, it's a different segment. It caters to a different type of people. We're really looking for people that are in that middle income section, people transitioning out of affordable housing. They can then transition to middle income housing and they can get a good place to live and not move into a worse place because their affordable housing project was so great. But this is really kind of first year students, teachers. It can be, first responders. It can cater to city and county employees. It's pretty wide open on who can live here, seniors, on who can live in the projects and stay in here long term and have a safe place to live, as well as having their rents artificially capped and reduced, which I think is one of the neatest part about this market is you have private groups, entities going in and instead of just buying these projects, which we've been seeing, and immediately doing maybe a little bit of rehab, modding, and flipping and increasing the rents by 10, 20%. You have groups like Sean and that are working with the CMFA who are going in, purchasing a project, artificially restricting the rent increases, and then giving discounts to rents. So I think that's probably all covered. Sean can go into a lot more detail on his project, on what we've seen in the project that he's done, but it's a new and kind of exciting opportunity to create middle income housing. There's a lot of new innovation going on and around middle income housing in this structure and a few other structures. And we hope to be able to continue to, maybe get the capital markets to behave a little bit more and to do more deals later this year.
All right, thank you, Ben. That was a good overview. And now we'll hear from Sean Bradley from Home Fed Corp. And he is Vice President of Affordable Housing. He specializes in development and investment with expertise in virtually all facets of the multifamily industry. And he has experience with more than $1.5 billion in transactions throughout his career. Both of our speakers here really understand a lot of zeros in their numbers. Very important. Sean spearheads and manages the acquisition process for the firm's specialized investments with an emphasis on creation and preservation of affordable housing. Sean also pursues non-traditional opportunities on behalf of the company, sourcing, analyzing, and structuring creative acquisition and investment opportunities for the firm. So Sean, you have done, is it one or a couple of these deals? What do they look like? Is there public participation? How do you process it through the city? Give us all how it really happens. And don't forget to unmute. Right?
Yep. Good afternoon. Yes, thank you, Lori. Ben, great job. I think you did a terrific job kind of summarizing, what the mechanics, what the program is and how it works. And yes, Lori, from soup to nuts, that's our role as the sponsor and project administrator. We really have to identify the opportunities within the given markets that we're focusing on. And it tends to be the real estate and the financing ends up being the easier parts of the program. We're really doing a lot of, community or direct outreach to both staff and elected officials within any given city that, we find ourselves working with. So ends up kind of being almost like an entitlement effort, which is somewhat time consuming if we all have been through that. And it just, you're doing more education to the benefits and any associated costs and that you're trying to bring to the community. So at Home Fed, they have a strong presence within the BIA and an established history within San Diego County. They process master plans within San Elijo Hills, Otay Ranch, and Fanita Ranch in Santee. So, you're talking about, over 30 years of being solely focused within the county for the most part. And, housing is a big part of that, obviously. Just in Otay Ranch alone, I think we're close to 16,000 residences approved, which will take, approximately 10 years to build out. And affordable housing is a huge part of that. Traditionally, we've leveraged the low-income housing tax credits to satisfy those obligations. But as Ben touched on, that is a stressed resource, typically oversubscribed, 4 times over, 5 times over in the application rounds. And it only focuses on the low and very low income bands. And that's great. I mean, those definitely are the people with the highest need. But, what it takes to deliver those developments is, a 3 to 5 year process a lot of times in the development cycle. And so you're just, and you're delivering, if it's a 9% deal, you're delivering, 55 to 75 units at a time, or a 4% deal, upwards of, 200 units. And that just, you're never going to keep pace in addressing the needs of the city, the county, the state. We're all witnessing it, especially with the tremendous appreciation in rent growth coming out of COVID. So, I mean, I really think this program fits well and facilitates bridging the gap between, what is traditionally subsidized in affordable housing and, what exists between market rate housing. And as Ben described, we're targeting income bands between 61 and 120% of AMI. And we typically break that up into a third, and a third at any opportunity that we're looking at. And that, as he said, we're really serving the backbone of the workforce in any community that we bring this program to. I mean, these are teachers, these are first responders, the service industry, people that are really probably stressed more than ever with housing costs. It's a burden. I mean, in most cases, you're looking at in excess of 50% of their monthly take going to housing. And so this helps stabilize that. It presents opportunity. It brings the cost of housing down, and just it really facilitates and enables specific cities to address their housing elements and what they're looking to satisfy within their own community. The program continues to evolve. Early on, there wasn't a way for a city to receive RENA credits, and that seems to be a real big focus. And in that time, since the program started into the better part of last year, it's been adopted where cities can receive RENA credits on the 80% of AMI units or lower, which, as I said, is a third, and that can be a good deal of units. There's just some special additional nuance that needs to be presented into the deal structure with basically an additional regulatory agreement that takes the affordability out for an additional period of time of 55 years. But that obviously has to be subordinate to the regulatory agreement that CMFA is putting in place. So, that is a big boon to our efforts here. And, as it relates to subsidy, cities were being asked to forego their portion of the county 1% mill rate on the property tax. And the program has since evolved to, address that in a number of ways. But we are now letting cities, participate in the operations to help them not be as sensitive to that as a deal point. I think there's clear ESG benefits, especially for a large corporation like Home Fed. But we see the value in how it serves the community by stabilizing and lowering the cost of housing, but it also provides upward mobility. Instead of people getting logjam into the lower and very low income bands within the housing that's typically provided, there's not a lot of incentive for those residents to move on and move up. They're oftentimes denying themselves a promotion because they don't want to be disqualified on the income restrictions and then lose the affordable housing that they have. This presents, as I said earlier, an opportunity to bridge that gap, provide upward mobility. Don't deny yourself that next raise, that next promotion. Move on, move up, and allow more people to come into the system that have been waiting on to get into those lower income opportunities. So I think it really just starts to open and move things along. And we're just really pleased with our own participation in this. I've been familiar with low-income housing tax credits as a program for close to 20 years, and actually facilitated a joint venture between my former company and Home Fed for their obligation within Otay Ranch. And that's what led to these discussions, over a year ago about, them finding interest and participating in leveraging, the breadth and scope of Home Fed as a corporation into this space, along with CMFA and Jeffries as the underwriter of the bonds that we place. So as a case study, I'd like to talk about the deal that we closed in November of last year. It was our first deal. I mean, we really entered the market in February of last year. We were able to establish and build out a robust pipeline of deals that we continue to pursue, not only here in the county, but elsewhere throughout the state. But our first deal was Solana at Grand, which is 519 units in Escondido. That deal was built in 1986 and had long-term ownership until about 2017, when a value add owner operator took possession of the property. And value add players, as you may or may not know, their business strategy is to go in, clean up the property, make it look current, but with the sole purpose of improving the economics by raising the rents. They were just wrapping up that strategy when we approached them on an off-market basis. And it was, our interests were mutually aligned. It was an opportunity for them to exit, and it was an opportunity for us to come in and introduce value to the existing residents at the property, which at the time, over 80% of them already income qualified. So that means that they were going to be the recipients of immediate discounts along with rent stabilization moving forward. But obviously, as I said, a huge part of the process is educating the city leaders, both staff and the elected officials, to the merits and benefits of the program, because as been stated, they ultimately have to join the sub JPA or the ownership entity, which thereby enables the tax abatement to ensue. Personally, I didn't have a lot of connections to the city of Escondido, but we knew we had, basically, we were dealing with an independent third party as the seller. Timing is always a sensitive issue. And so we wanted to expedite our discussions with the city as soon as we could. So that we reached out to John Mendez from Mendez Strategies, who is a known government affairs consultant within the community. And he was able to effectuate those efforts and quickly get us into dialogue with the city. And it worked out tremendous. I mean, we did the appropriate outreach. It was a fair and balanced approach. We weren't coming over the top of staff. We were, educating staff at the same time that we were conducting outreach to the electeds and touring them through the property and helping them understand the true value and benefit that we were trying to bring to the community of Escondido. As I said, It was the first deal done in the county, and I know that we're in discussions with other cities throughout the county that are interested in learning more about the concept and adopting it, for their own residents. So once we were able to garner the interest and support of the city and its staff, the numbers really spoke for itself. I mean, we were talking about, if you looked at where the 90-day leasing was happening at the property, you're looking at 15% trade outs on new leases. We were able to step in and demonstrate an ability to say, at the different income bands of 80, 100, 120, I mean, we were respectively providing discounts of 21% to the residents that qualified in the 80% of AMI category. I think it was 17% for the residents qualifying at 100% of the AMI, and 12% for 120. 120, where Solana Grand fits in the submarket, market rents are well below the 120% rent limits, but we were still able to provide and pass along meaningful discounts to the residents. And that benefits the community at large. Not only does it, alleviate some of that cost, or the burden of housing to that household, but they find themselves with more disposable income. And where do they go out into the community and deploy that and redistribute that income to stores and shops most of the time in the immediate area. So I think it extends well beyond the property itself. I can tell you that since closing in November and having Graystar as the on-site property manager, adhere to the regulatory agreement and turn the property over to those prescribed regulations, we now have a waiting list at the property of over 400 people. So you can tell that the need and the demand is there. And so we are really encouraged at the work that we intend to do moving forward and bringing this to new communities and throughout the state.
That's for sure. We do know the demand is there, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear about a project in South Bay of 100 units, and there's 1,600 on the waiting list. And so we need to have more of these opportunities for families. And we talk about, we're also proud of the research facilities and the high wages that we have in San Diego County, but every research facility has a whole cadre of employees, support employees that are not making high wages, and they should not be relegated to driving to Riverside County for their jobs. So this is one solution. And you've talked a lot about, the need for education in coming in and being able to prepare the council and the staff about what this program is and how it can really work. And so, John, I guess you were able to move things pretty quickly. And what did you see? If you hadn't done that, I think the chances of getting this done would have been very slim. So John and his team bring more than 25 years of experience in developing and executing public relations and advocacy campaigns, media relation initiatives, and community affairs strategies. And I will say that John is a strategic thinker, a resourceful problem solver, trusted leader, effective communicator, and a skillful team player. So you guys picked the right guy to be on your team to help get marshal this through the process.
Yeah.
So what was that like, John?
Yeah, thank you, Lori. It was number one, it was lots of fun, and thanks everyone for being on the line with us. This project was a particular concern for me because I actually got the call from Sean the middle of June. I was up at Davis getting ready to see my daughter graduate from college. And as we all know, those who have adult kids that age, what's the next step after college? Well, finding a home. And so I was really enthralled by the opportunity to help someone like my own daughter and see this program provide safe and more affordable housing to lots of young people and people that are starting out in their careers. So can we put the couple slides up? If not, great, thank you. So go to the next slide, and then we'll, yep, go to the next one. So here's our objective.
Let's go back
this
to
one's
that
perfect.
one. Let's go back
wanna go
one
back
so
there,
we
Lauren?
can get, yeah, just get a picture of who we're talking about.
Yeah, so the program target is really middle income, right? Could be police, fire, military, those young enlisted military that are so close to, they're so abundant in San Diego, brand new teachers, brand new nurses that are just all starting out of their careers. We need to find housing for these folks. And this is what we have heard either in the media or you name it yourself, but this is called the missing middle, because oftentimes we focus on the lowest income. And this missing middle is also an important tier because they're the ones that we hope will move up and continue to move up and purchase their market rate housing. These are just some figures there that you can see. They might be adjusted based on what Sean just said. As he indicated, the 80% band was actually able to realize a 21% savings in their monthly rent. So super important. Let's go to the next slide. So our objective was simple. For those who are on the phone, many of us have to get projects approved. This one was unique because we're not building anything, right? We're not building anything. There's no new sticks going in the ground. And so we're actually approving a joint powers authority that Ben started talking about. But nevertheless, the objective is simple. We have to count to three. 3 out of 5 council members have to like this project, see its value, and actually vote yes on it. But our stretch goal was not to just get to 3, because the direction that Sean gave me was Home Fed has a huge following. It does great work all over the county, and their brand really matters to them. And so we didn't want to eke out a 3-0 vote. We actually wanted to go for the full enchilada and get 5. And I'll save that for in a moment what we actually got to. We also had strict timelines. As Ben pointed out, the markets change, sellers' interests change, and so Sean gave us a strict timeline of getting this approved as soon as possible. And that ended up being that as soon as possible ended up being about 4.5 to 5 months. We also were thinking about the long-term effect. We didn't want to go in and strong arm anybody. We wanted to really go in and educate council members and staff. And so we were also laying the groundwork for future projects. Next slide, please. What were the risks involved in this particular area? Well, because it was a new program and it's untested, nobody knew what to expect. You couldn't refer back to another program in the county, another project, to say, well, Vista did it this way, or the city of San Diego did it this way. This was completely brand new, and we had to overcome that. Timing issue I already alluded to. We did not want the project to drop out due to a delay, and so we had to work at a very crisp momentum. We also had the risk of the untimely resignation of the city manager. Not a resignation, but he is retiring, and he was there for, exactly, Lori, and so when you don't have leadership at the top, things tend to get a little wobbly, and so that was one of the things that we had to overcome, was a new city manager. And it also turned out that the new incoming city manager was living in a project site, and not the one for Home Fed, but for another client. And so the city manager had to completely recuse himself of providing any involvement and any leadership due to that little task. We also had, this was during COVID again, so we had staff that was out of the physical office, and not just out of the physical office, but we learned throughout the process that they were actually working far away, and that presented its own tasks or risks, that we had to overcome. We were in different time zones, and so we were oftentimes communicating with the staff member very early in the morning on their timetable. And then the other thing, we all know that we live in the world of politics. People view the world differently. And in this particular setting, we had a 3-2 partisanship outlook. And so we wanted to manage that properly. Next slide. So what was our approach? Number one, we wanted to secure political approval with the council members who are actually going to vote on the project. Some people like to do staff first out of deference to staff. They're familiar with that process. It seems like the right thing to do, and it could be. Our strategy, though, was to meet first with the council and to not at this point convince anyone of this project, but to introduce the project concept to them and to understand what they knew about middle income housing, what they knew about affordable housing. And it was to rather gather information and collect data for the client. We wanted to listen to any questions that they had, collect that data and articulate those concerns back to our client. At this point, it's Sean. And then we also did a parallel outreach slightly thereafter to staff and keep them informed of our outreach to the staff, the council members. We also were articulating the whole time that we had a specific timeline that we needed to meet. If we didn't meet this timeline, then this deal could actually go away. And so we kept them abreast of that. We didn't strong arm them, we just kept them abreast of that. And then what we thought was really critical to our approach was we wanted to, at the end of the day, remind people that yes, it is a complex finance program. Yes, it is dealing with real estate. But at the end of the day, we were trying to sell the merits of the project and let them know that renters would be affected by their decisions, that the average ordinary Escondidian would be impacted with their decisions. And so that was the backdrop that we always articulated to them. Next slide. So what was our path to success? We met with council members multiple times, over the phone, in person, checked off each of their concerns. We continued to meet with staff, all unfortunately over the phone, none in person, except one meeting. We scheduled in-person visits to the project site, and we thought this was really I wouldn't call it a magic bullet, but it was certainly effective, because at this point, now the council members got to see the renters. They got to see the product. It was high quality. It was well maintained, that it was safe, that families actually live there. And it brought the human side of the project very quickly to the equation. Sorry for the spelling error there and communicate, but there was community benefits. And then lastly, we tried to remind people of this missing middle problem. Next slide. So I'm going to stop here. I want to give adequate time to everyone on the line asking questions. What did we end up getting? We ended up getting a 5-0 vote, and the partisanship never entered into the equation. Everybody came home happy. Everybody smiled. Everybody shook hands at the end. The council members congratulated themselves. I see them oftentimes in the community now, and they all come back and say, thank you so much for investing in our community. And when's the next project going to happen? So with that, Lori, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, and we have a couple of questions, but I have a quick question. Is there a requirement, or what is the state of the property? Are they, because we're not adding supply, we're taking existing supply, making it more affordable, but are they required to be new, fairly new, or are they older properties?
I can answer that. They are not required to be anything one way or the other.
Okay.
I would say, I think the deals that were getting the taglines in the press last year certainly were, new construction, Class A core build that, they were definitely grabbing the headlines. And, that I think there was something to that, because if you look at what the profile of the owner was that was selling that property, they tend to be merchant builders. They're going to build to sell anyways. And the fact that we could come in and not have to have the property be stabilized or, leased up to a certain amount, because we would actually prefer it if we could step in early and lease to renters that would, fit the profile that we're trying to achieve through the regulatory agreement. If you look at Salon at Grand, that was built in 1986. So not, the brand new shiny thing hitting the market. I think the embedded resident profile at that property was more representative of the population we were trying to serve. And we just underwrite accordingly for that. So I told the previous owner in their value add strategy put 17 million into it. And most of that ended up being, kind of life safety and new, refreshing the interiors to current market conditions or current market standards. But, we're setting this up for long-term ownership for the CMFA and the city of Escondido. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to address any immediate additional items that need to be adhered to through the capital program, and then set itself up for, continued, just make sure that there weren't going to be opening ourselves up for any deferred maintenance or issues that required capital calls, 10, 15 years, 20 years down the road. So we actually underwrote an additional 20,000 per unit or $10.3 million in a capital expenditure fund that went into the underwriting of the program.
Okay, good answer. And this is a complicated program, so we have some good questions, the tough questions to really understand if this is a real practical. Can we do this? Is it going to be sustainable? Who else can get into this market? Although Ben says it's a little oversubscribed, right? But the state is looking to create some guardrails around this type of deal structure to ensure a minimum set of community benefits and long-term financial feasibility via AB 1850. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I can cover that. So I think the AB 1850 is evolved slightly from when it was first introduced to legislation. It really focused a little bit more on how public offerings worked. I don't think they fully understood the aspect of public offerings as well as a GO bond versus a private activity bond and the nuances that go into that, where groups like Sean cannot put any equity into the deal because it's a GO bond versus a private activity bond. So there's some structuring issues that I think were not clear when they originally set out to write AB 1850, the newest, and we're working with the author of that bill. So the newest concerns seem to be around the regulatory agreements and compliance, and then also affordability. And so the regulatory agreements and compliance, it's easy. All of the 54 projects that have been done all have regulatory agreements recorded on the properties. There's compliance that's due on all of those. The compliance standards, I think 1850, it's not currently in there. It's what they want to update the current legislation to include. I haven't seen what their new compliance standards are going to be, but I think they're trying to get to like a TCAC, some kind of universal state board that would monitor or do something with compliance, but it's not currently in the legislation. The next part of the legislation is they would like to see a look at the affordability of the units and have 100% of the units decrease rents by 20% across the board, which sounds great, but that's not how financings work. In that, when you go through, when you buy the building, we can't arbitrarily go before we buy the building and just start pulling people's incomes. We have to wait to buy the building and then qualify their incomes from there. The other portion and the way these deals work compared to like a LIHTC program, the LIHTC program gets private activity bonds, they get tax credits, they get grants and funding from other third-party sources, and then they also have no property taxes. So this program does not ask for any of that. This is just purely removing the property taxes and subsidizing the rent that way. We don't think programmatically people that are at the 120% spectrum should be getting a 20% discount across the board. Really, that higher rent is used to subsidize the lower rent of the units. And if you look at how well these have been done, you don't get your immediate kind of bang for the buck day one. You get it 6 months later, 8 months later. A case study that I can go through, that's not Sean's deal, so he doesn't have any influence here, but we are looking at a deal. We were going to purchase it for 72 million. We worked with the city for some time. By the time the city was ready to move forward with the approval, the seller said, it's been too long, I'm selling at market rate. And they ended up selling it for 84 million. And the project sold. If you look at the swing in rents, when we purchased the project, that bottom bucket of the 80% and below was going to go from $1,800 a month to $1,400 a month. With not being able to put the project into this essential function housing bond and CMFA purchasing it, the rents from those bottom tiered people actually went up to $2,800 a month. And so you have within 1 year a $1,400 net swing to those residents from what CMFA would have bought it to what we're seeing in the current market space is people coming in and buying these and doing a little bit of rehab work and flipping them. So this program is really geared to provide immediate relief to the lower income buckets, but also you get this long-term relief for the other buckets. So I think AB 1850 is a work in progress. There's a lot of the things I agree with. There's some things that are just not feasible. The immediate 20% reduction across the board to all units, there would be no projects done. There would be no projects done in this mechanism, which, that's probably a matter of opinion, but I do want to say is the two deals that we did in Escondido, each of those have a waiting list of about 400 people right now. So we have waiting lists. I think it's close to 780-ish right now for those two projects of needed middle income housing. So there's obviously a great need. The rents are there now, and the rent increases, we've capped the rent increases so that you're not seeing this astronomical. I think everybody that's on this is probably seeing the rent increases in San Diego, some of the highest in the state, 10 to 20% increases from the time that a unit turns into the next renter. So the next question, I can also go into that. It's talking about how can you buy a project that is above market rate? And essentially there are different ways of looking at doing this program. The CMFA, we only allow one bidder to bid on a project. We don't allow multiple people to go and bid on one project. And the reasoning for that is because if you had multiple people bidding on a project, they're essentially bidding the project price up and selling it to the CMFA for a higher amount. So CMFA doesn't allow that to happen. We haven't had multiple bidders on any of our deals that we've gone through. There were some early 2021 scenarios that they were being bid up above market rate, but really as the market changed and evolved, that wasn't the case anymore. So they're not being bid up astronomically above what current markets are. And currently right now, they're not being bid up at all because the capital markets don't function the way we need them to, the interest rates, and we cannot be competitive with market rate buyers right now. So that has changed a little bit since that happened, since that scenario. But there have been deals, and this program is only really 3 years old in California. There's been deals that have been done, in my opinion, the right way. There's been deals that have been done other ways, and really ways to avoid that is just not letting 3 or 4 project sponsors bid on one project, and you solve that issue. But again, there's not even that issue to have right now because this mechanism of financing, we can't be competitive with current market rate purchasers. I'm hoping we'll be able to soon, but not right now. Next question, cities.
Yeah, to go on to the risk from the city. I mean, you talked about that cities losing property tax, and so there was a fix that's come about. What does that fix look like? And so what are the cities losing at this time?
Let's talk about the risks real quick, and then we'll talk about property taxes. So if you're looking at a typical conduit issuance, the city goes through the TEFRA resolution, and the resolution that approves the TEFRA, in the language, it clearly states there's no risk, liabilities, or moral obligations to the city. Through this program, and I think something we haven't really failed to go into a lot, we have failed to go into this detail, is in this program, the city is joining what's called, you can call it a sub JPA, or they're joining another JPA, a special finance authority in our case. That special finance authority, when they join that, the resolution and the bond documents, again, clearly state that the cities are not, they're not put at risk. There's no moral or legal liabilities put onto the city. And so the city's not fiscally responsible. So the city is clearly cut out through all of the bond documents and all the approving documents, that they're not going to be taking on additional risk. They're not a party to the transaction in the financing, and they're not a party on the deed. So they don't really have that. But like everybody knows, it's in real estate, you can be sued over anything. CMFA gets named in lawsuits all the time because someone didn't pay the window cleaner guy, and they sue everybody. So, I mean, obviously somebody can sue anybody, but the bond documents and the joining resolutions clearly carve out the city's lack of liability. So there is that. The additional part that we didn't really go into is through the public benefit agreement, the cities really have at year 15 the right to control the project. In this scenario, in this transaction, Sean does not have any equity upside in the deal. So it doesn't matter what happens to the project. He does not have an equity event in the project. At 15 years or 30 years, if the project is sold, no equity goes to Sean. And this is very different than a tax credit deal or any other real estate deal. What happens is if a deal is sold, the CMFA and Sean's group does not get an equity upside. It's 100% of the equity goes to paying any outstanding debts, and then the rest of it goes back to the city. So the city really controls the project through what's called a public benefit agreement at year 15 on. And really that year 15 is really a balance in the bond structuring of when we have more equity to debt in the project, and you're able to pay off the full amount of any excess debts that are owed. In addition to that, with the taxes, the program has evolved since the beginning deals, and cities are nervous about losing a property tax, or nervous about losing their property taxes. Unlike all affordable housing deals, all private activity bond deals that have tax credits, when the bonds are issued, the projects automatically go off the tax roll. When CMFA, we just did the San Diego Zoo, we did a financing for them. The property automatically goes off the tax roll. If we do a Goodwill store, or we did a Boy Scouts thing out there somewhere out in eastern San Diego County, those properties are automatically taken off the tax roll. In this case, the city is not getting the same benefit they would be getting in a tax credit deal, where they're getting that really low 30% AMI level units. And so what's offered to the city is that they can get a host fee. The host fee essentially pays for a loss of somewhat, it's not tied to it, but they're able to elect to receive property taxes, what they would receive in property taxes. We don't think they should do. I mean, programmatically, they shouldn't do it, because therefore we could provide more affordability in the project. But some cities do elect to receive a host fee.
That might not, and a lot of cities, so that when you don't have property taxes, cities generally only get 12% of the property taxes paid in. It's a different percentage for every city. So
it is a different percentage for every city. So you have to look at every city and see what they're going to get. But really, through the end of the deal at year 15, if the project's sold, or if it's sold later on, the property taxes are reimbursed, and then all excess revenue goes back to the city. So it's a delay at worst case scenario of their loss of property taxes. And if they choose to take the property taxes, they could also do that.
Sure. And even if there's a host fee to the city, it doesn't equal the entire property taxes being abated.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So even if you pay a host fee to the city to try to help them become whole, the property taxes that you're not paying is significantly more than that.
No, I mean, if you let's just say for easy numbers, the city gets 100,000 from this property for property taxes. A host fee could equal maybe 95,000. So there's a bunch of other tax requirements and things that go into those calculations that we don't need to spend a lot of time on, but they're not out a significant amount of property taxes. But again, that's only if the city elects to take that. If the city does not elect to take the property, a host fee, you can then restrict the project even more and create more affordability in the project. So it's a balance as to what the cities want to do.
We just have a couple of minutes left. Are there any comments either from Sean or John that we've missed a couple points, or you want to add a couple points in the last minute or two?
No, I think Ben's done a great job addressing the question. I mean, those were some very well pointed questions. Obviously, people who are familiar with the program and what some of the perceived risks might be. That's kind of the second half of what Ben and I and everybody else that are trying to put this program to work in the market are contending with. There's even in the Escondido deal, the city elected to bring in an independent financial advisor to review the deal. Unfortunately, that advisor was kind of going through the learning curve themselves. I don't know how they can adequately provide advice when they don't fully understand the subject matter. But that's part of what comes with a new program and the innovation that's taking place, and the program continues to evolve. I mean, this is nothing what it was like when it was first introduced, just 3 years ago. So, we are the experts. We're the ones working the market in the space on a day-to-day basis. And, from a political aspect, Ben's on the front lines at a state level, and, I'm on the ground at the property level, and John's there kind of synthesizing, bringing everyone together in any given opportunity, between local governments and what we're trying to bring to the community.
They're trying to provide a safe place so you can have good education for the council and the staff, because it is complicated. And it's like, really, we're going to lose all of this, but we'll get different kind of housing.
I can answer the last two questions super quickly. What's the carrot to provide? On all the approvals, there's a very thorough process of approving. And it's really, what does the city want to do? This project is up for sale by a market rate seller. Do they just want it to be sold to another market rate buyer who's going to increase the rents? Or do they want it sold into a program like ours who will fix the rents? And it's really for the city to decide. These cities have decided they don't want all their projects just being sold market rate and people jacking up the rents. They want to see this middle income housing created. The last question was, are these a fixed or a floating rate interest? For the most part, all of these bonds have been done with a fixed rate. There are some slight different structures, but it has to do with a lot of different caveats. This is not a stereotypical financing you see as in a LIHTC deal. There can be a lot of different weird nuances in subleases. Maybe the city owns part of the land, maybe somebody owns part of one project. There's some different reasons why they're not, but in general, these are not interest only bullet maturity bonds that has been out in the news. It's just not true. Most of these bonds, almost all of the bonds have a fixed rate for the full 30 years, and they mature during that time period.
And again, Ben, just to expand upon, that last question regarding the tax and the cities and the counties, you did a great job describing, what happens in a capital event after year 15, but, when should there be a capital event if the property is sold or reverts to the city in its entirety? And the money's there, the city at their own election can repay the foregone taxes of any taxing entity.
The last question is really complicated. On new construction, there's interest carry costs, and that's about that's a whole other topic on how do you do this in a new construction. There has not been any deals done yet in a new construction in this function, but everybody, the capital markets, the underwriters, the lenders, the investors, everybody's working on a new construction option. It's just trying to figure that out is where we're all at. But you can feel free to call me, and I'll walk you through where we're at on new construction.
And with that, we've hit the 1 o'clock mark. I think you've answered all the questions, presented very nicely. We appreciate all of our panelists, Ben and Sean and John. And I'm sure that you'd answer any questions offline if someone comes up with something. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Great week.